Some leaders leave footprints, others leave libraries. You're tuning into the Authors on Mission podcast, where industry giants become literacy legends. In every episode, we talk with authors who turn their brilliance into books that transform lives. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authors on Mission. Welcome to your authorship experience. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Authors on Mission podcast, the podcast committed to bringing you top-tier insights and strategies from established experts who've achieved remarkable success in their fields. I'm your host, Danielle Hutchinson, Chief Creative Officer at Authors on Mission, and today I am thrilled to welcome Janice Porter, a LinkedIn consultant and strategist who's transforming how professionals build relationships through the world's largest professional network. She began her career as a teacher, transitioned into corporate training, and now she specializes in helping professionals who feel like they're the best kept secret in their industry gain visibility and build valuable connections through LinkedIn. She's also the host of the Relationships Rule podcast, highly recommend. And, she just approaches networking with a service mindset, prides herself on being a communicative connector who brings like-minded people together. So today we're going to have a really fun conversation, and I'm looking forward to it. Here we go. Let's dive in. Welcome to our show, Janice.
Thank you so much, Danielle, and thanks for that wonderful introduction. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we always love welcoming new experts in various fields onto the show. And, what's interesting to all of our listeners today is Janice has not published a book of her own, but she's been in a couple compilation books, which is really exciting to know about. And, something that we actually haven't quite dived into too much on this podcast. So it's going to be really exciting to hear what that's like. Before we go into that, though, would you mind just giving our audience a little bit more of a backstory to you? I talked a little bit about how you're a teacher and what you do with LinkedIn, but enlighten us a little bit more, kind of what brought you to this path and, where are you right now?
Okay. Thank you. Well, I started as a teacher, always wanted to be a teacher when I was in school, and loved teaching, taught children from probably first grade to sixth grade, and loved that. But I didn't like the bureaucracy associated with public school system. And so I didn't stay too long. I taught for 14 years. That's a long time, actually, but not a lifetime. And then I moved into corporate training, still teaching, just different ages of people and same issues. It was fun. And I was able to leverage a contract training position for a good number of years, which allowed me to raise my second daughter as well, who was very big in athletics. So I always wanted to be the cheerleader at her games. And then that gig did end, and I had to figure out what I was going to do with myself. And I got into the world of network marketing, which I love. I love the whole model of it. I love the independence of it. But I was looking for another piece to add to my arsenal, but I also didn't know how to run a business. I'd been a teacher, I'd been a trainer. And so running a business was a whole new thing. And so I learned the hard way, I did everything wrong. And I eventually got on a path where I was able to take my teaching and bring it into the business world when I learned about the power of LinkedIn. So once I learned the power of LinkedIn, I was like, oh my goodness, I could teach this to other people. And that's kind of how it started. The light went on, and I figured out a way to teach the way that I wanted to, and to help business owners and business professionals use it to help their businesses grow. And so that became the last maybe 12 years of my life. But I also was able to meld it with my network marketing company, because the tool that I work with is one that can be used by a lot of business professionals to help them stay connected and to network effectively with people and pretty much stay top of mind. So it all worked together. And because of that, I finally came up with a name that worked for both. And the umbrella of what I do is relationship marketing. So that's kind of where I'm at now.
Thank you for sharing that journey with us. I think a lot of our listeners today can probably relate to that, in the fact that, a lot of us might stay on one path, the teaching, for example, where they're
You're a teacher, right?
Yeah, exactly. As I was thinking of the same thing, I know what it's like to, be happy with where you are and loving it, but then you want to expand and try something new. Right. So I think a lot of people can, definitely, relate to that experience. I guess I'm curious, you kind of have trial and errors along the way of building this business. Did you have any particular resource you were looking to in terms of, as you were going about it? Did you have a coach or mentor or friend, or was it just
Oh, yes. Always learning from different people, always, mentors along the way. And also because I love connecting with people, I found a couple of few LinkedIn trainers that I followed at first to learn how they were doing things and then adapted for myself. And now I consider some of them my associates and some specialize in other things than I do and me in others than they do. And so we're able to work with each other and help when problems come up or when LinkedIn does something new and different and we don't know how to approach it. So I like to have that mastermind of collective of people that I can draw on to help me. So that's kind of where I've gone with that. But people generally who are entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, they understand the struggles and the trials and tribulations. So we're always, talking to people and helping each other. I've met some amazing people on LinkedIn, actually. One girl I met when I was just getting started, and we're still friends today. And she was a LinkedIn trainer. I was a LinkedIn trainer. She's branched into different areas. I've branched into a different area. And so we work together on how we can better our LinkedIn businesses, which is kind of fun.
I mean, that's amazing. I think, this is a piece of advice that anybody listening today could definitely take home with them is that, you need to reach out to others. You need to learn from them and leverage them, not to your advantage, but also to see how you could each help each other. And clearly it's what you did in order to get where you're at. So, kind of branching off of that, kind of going into more of the compilation books that you're a part of. Well, first off, if you don't mind telling us a little bit about these books and sort of what led you to them. And the reason I'm segueing into that now is because when you think about it, an author, for the most part, you think you're a single aspect, right? You're one writer, maybe you have a team of people helping you with editing and publishing, but a compilation book in a way means you're a team, right? And you have those relationships kind of within the pages of your book. Maybe you didn't actually meet the people in the book, but it's kind of interesting to think about. So shine a little light on that for us. I'm curious to know what it's all about.
Well, I never really wanted to write a book. I didn't feel that it was my thing. I thought I loved talking to people, and I didn't think I had that much to offer when it came to writing. Some of those people that I just mentioned, who support me in different ways, one of them in particular said, I want you in this book. I'm encouraging you to write a chapter of this book. All you've got to do is write, X number of words and tell your story. And this first one was to do with people in network marketing. And there's many stories of people who have gone from rags to riches, in a lot of network marketing stories and even in traditional businesses. I was not that person that I felt I had an exciting story, but I said, okay, I'll give it my all. I'll try, I'll put something together. And when I was doing that, I realized that, I guess I do have a story. I guess, there is something here that people can learn from, because that's really the purpose of that book, was to, inspire others, right, to do the same. So that was my first experience. However, I basically just submitted the document. I'm not sure if I got a little bit of editing, but not a lot. And then, of course, you have your little bio and your contact info at the end of it, and you just let it go, and you don't know where it's going to go. And it's one of those things, though, that I learned that, okay, I bought a few books. I've bought a few of the books when the book was launched, and really, I still have a lot of them on the floor in my office because I don't tend to push them out. Like it's just, I don't know. You should be able to. You should, you want to. You want to share your book and use it, as I've said with you when I've asked you questions on my podcast. It's like better than a business card, right? But compilation book's a little bit different, so I wasn't sure. And then the second experience was with the same person who wrote this or put this book together called The 262 Women in this book. And it's an amazing feat to have put that together. And if I'm smart, I take that book and I now contact all those women in that book that inspire me and say, hey, we're sisters. We're in that book together. I see that you do this, this, and that. I really have built-in networking opportunities there, which I still haven't taken complete advantage of. So there you go. Just experiences. The third one was a woman. I'd been on her podcast and she'd been on my podcast, and she wanted to put together some, I don't know, I forget what it was called now. It was something about more than a few words, I think it was called. Or anyway, I did write a piece for her because it was easy to write an essay, but not to write, at least I thought it was, because it wasn't as daunting as writing a book. So in my podcast, I don't know if I asked you this question or not, but it was about curiosity. And I tend to ask a lot of people what their take is on curiosity. And so I wrote a piece about curiosity for this book. And I was quite proud of it, actually. So nothing more came of it other than I'm in that book. But there you go. You never know, right? You never know where people come from unless you ask them. But I'm sure that some people have read my pieces in those books. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so to everybody listening today, I was on Janice's podcast as well, so that's why she was referencing that. And you're right, you did ask me that question, and the question was, what is your take on curiosity? Is it, something that you're born with, or is it something that
Yeah.
you kind of grow into? So yeah, we did talk about that, and that's
We
a
did,
really
yeah.
interesting topic to think about. And I think in relation to today's conversation, you have to be a little bit curious, especially when it comes to writing books or dabbling in something new. I mean, Janice, in your case, you didn't even want to write a book. You were like,
Yeah,
I'm
I know.
not interested in it. But you showed that curiosity, for example, and you dabbled in it, and now you're in three. So,
Yeah, I know. It's crazy, right? I think for all the time, it would have made sense to have had my own because there's different things around it. Obviously, the people who come to you and write a book for their business or to highlight themselves or to showcase themselves or to tell their story, because there are a lot of interesting stories out there about people who have, overcome things and so on and so forth. Then it's all yours. Then it's, you can choose everything about the book, about the look of it, about the way it's marketed. And I think I learned from those compilation books that, you don't have that control. So it's much better to have your own. And if I were to do it again, it would be to do it on my own.
yeah, well, it's never too late to. I think it might
I
have
know.
been, we might have mentioned that, there's no, time in your life when you could ever
Right.
start writing. But this brings me to another question that I just thought of. You didn't want to write. You're probably sitting there at the computer like, oh, I'd much rather be,
Yeah.
consulting my LinkedIn clients. But, maybe you can offer some bits of advice for people who don't want to write, like writing tips for people who don't want to write. What got you through that? Did you have to really like motivate yourself to get going, or was it kind of simple once you started?
Well,
Like,
it's never simple at the beginning. I feel as though if I can get to, I think it's the same starting process as when you're going to do a presentation in person or in a webinar or at an event for people. If you can get the outline of it in your mind or down on paper, so you know where you're going from, A to B to C and so on, and then writing it will become easier. So I needed a plan first. And once I got a plan or an outline, I was then able to fill in the gaps. The hardest piece for me, though, I will admit, and I think I said this to you, is the stories, is the examples. Like it's one thing, you hear it all the time. Facts tell, stories sell. And so when you have real life examples within your manuscript or whatever, then it's going to be a lot more interesting for the reader, right? Would you say that?
yeah, no, definitely. And I think, I've spoken about this a lot of times on this podcast as well. You need to make it engaging to your readers by having those stories. And not only that, but, it allows them to relate to what you're saying too and see you as a
Right,
person and not just somebody who's behind these pages of a book, right? You're an actual
right.
person. So definitely. And I do agree with the outlining being a huge part of it. Once you have sort of that formula to follow, everything else
Mhm.
just flows. And, I do agree that, when I start working, that one is the hardest part because you need to
Yeah.
know what you're going to say. Once you have that, it's almost like a recipe book that you're just pulling from and you're you know what's
Yeah,
coming
you
next.
got the material. And that's the biggest thing that I learned is that I know more than I think I know. And,
Yeah, I love that tip. You know more than you think you know. So, no, really cool stuff. So I'd like to segue a little bit off of that because I know your main expertise here is main for LinkedIn and giving people the strategies to really amplify that as a tool for their own right and whatever it is that they're looking for on the platform. I'm wondering, would you like to share a little bit more about what you do with that? And, perhaps a lot of people listening today are authors, so how can they maybe, use this LinkedIn as a tool for their own benefit as well?
Sure, that's a great question, and thank you, Danielle, for that, because I do and I have worked with a lot of people who have written books, and some are, authors, and some are business people who have become authors as part of what they do. And I've noticed some things like I remember working with somebody once who was so focused on getting her book out and it all being about her and her book that she wasn't really realizing that. And please don't get me wrong, because I'll come around to the other piece of it, but nobody cares about you on a platform like LinkedIn
Okay.
till you care about them, right? So show me how you and your book can help me. Don't push your book on me until I get to know you a little bit. Does that make sense? Because that comes through in how you create your profile. It comes through in how you interact in the DMs, in the mailbox with people. And, it's funny because I just met a gentleman on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, and this is how it happened. He looked at my profile. I looked at who looked at your profile, and I saw this guy had looked at my profile and I didn't know who he was. So I went and looked at his profile. And on the top of his LinkedIn profile, on his banner, was his book. And I loved the name of his book. It was called The Generosity Mindset. And that fit so much with what I do that I went, ooh, this guy sounds interesting. Let me read his profile, which I did. And then I wrote him a connection request and I said, thanks for looking at my profile. I said, thanks for looking at my profile. I'm curious, what brought you there, but I'm also curious about your book. I think there might be some synergy here and would love to talk to you. So he agreed. We connected. We had a Zoom call. We've now been already on each other's podcasts and we're looking to collaborate somehow because he was like, everything he wrote in his book was everything I do. So you just never know. But the thing is, he and his profile spoke to me because of the way he does business. And that came out on his profile and the name of his book. How can you not like that? The generosity mindset, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, and then he sent me his book because I was going to have him on my podcast. And it was very special because he gets it. And so not everybody does. So having a book, I did digress a little bit, but having a book and you want to make sure that your book is on your banner somehow so that you are marketing it and people see that you are an author. But I don't like people to get caught up in, best-selling author, top of the list, because everybody gets to do that these days. It's an Amazon thing. I don't know. I mean, unless it's the New York bestseller list, to me, that's different. I don't know. Am I right? Is it different?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. These days it is a little bit more simple to get on the bestseller list. It doesn't diminish the quality, or anything
No.
like that, but it's a title to have and it's something, to hold near and dear. But I see what you mean. Like it's more so about, what you do with the book than just having the title on it. Is that what you were going to say, Janice?
Yeah, and it's about you want to be proud of it. You want to use it as a tool, but don't push it on people, So build relationships first, build rapport with people, and then offer your book up, if they're interested. Don't just send it, of course, but be generous and be thoughtful about how you do it. But there's definitely opportunities that people are missing on LinkedIn when they're looking for opportunities to speak about their book and they don't do it the right way.
Yeah, definitely. And you can't let those opportunities kind of pass you by, especially with these days. If you have a profile that's set up and established and it
Yeah.
highlights what you're able to offer, then, people like you can pop in and be like, generosity. I love that concept. What kind of connections can we make? And it just opens
Yes.
door after door. I think
Yeah.
that's amazing. So, one thing that, you and I spoke of in the past is the idea of continuously leveraging your book and making use of it. For example, this client had it on their profile. So that author that you mentioned before had the generosity book on their profile. That's what I'm referring to. So I think the connection I'm trying to make here is that there's a parallel between social media presence and book publishing. So, just like having an updated LinkedIn profile, won't necessarily generate you more clients the same way that having a book might give you more clients too. So
You have to
my
do the
point of
work.
this is, oh, sorry, go ahead.
You have to do the work.
Yes, that's what I was getting at there is, you have to do the work and make those connections. So
Yeah.
what sort of tips and advice and what can you speak of on the LinkedIn side, when you have a client who has that profile, they have everything set up, what do you need to do to actually make use of it?
I think the first thing to think of is give your best stuff away.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is you're a writer, you've written a book, and now you're going to take snippets of that. That may be lessons learned, it might be the process that you go through and while in your work or whatever it is that you're espousing in your book, take snippets of it and teach us on LinkedIn pieces of those. By, in other words, have good, meaty content on a consistent basis that will inspire people to want to read the book. So give us a snippet, of something that you have in there, but make it, in a post type format. Make sure that you have a call to action at the end of it. And the call to action, of course, could be you could find more about this in my book or where you can find the book or whatever. But do those things on a regular basis. Be consistent so you're visible, so you're shown as the authority in your field. And that can do a lot. The thing about it, though, that people don't do is they don't go and check the engagement piece. Are
Mm.
they getting engagement on those posts? Are people commenting? Are people asking questions? You want to make sure that you respond, that you build connection with people through that. And that's a good strategy for people to build their audience for their book. There's also, of course, my favorite is to do outreach for people, to find the right people. And you have to decide, am I looking for new prospects, new readers? Am I looking for new places to speak about my book? Am I looking for new strategic partners that will have the same audience as my book has, but they do different things, so we could collaborate in some way? And then, have conversations with these people. Maybe when you find someone who is like this guy that I talked about earlier with generosity mindset, offer to send them your book as, as a gesture of whatever's to come. Be generous and give your best things away.
Yeah, I think that's the main piece of advice that we can all take from that right now is, give your best things away. And, in the writing world, I believe we call that the lead magnet, right? The kind of thing that's supposed to draw you in a little bit, get your mind thinking, and then, potentially you either purchase more books or establish more connections with them. I have a whole collection of books that, my clients, my podcast attendees have, passed along. And it's great because now I have, books to pull off and read whenever I, am interested about a certain topic, but also it reminds me of our conversations. And, whenever I need something down the road, I know I can reach out to that author. So an amazing tip right there. Now, when I was looking through some of your stuff, Janice, I saw, one of your taglines was that visibility is non-negotiable. So I think that might, really resonate a lot with, a lot of our authors as well. Like, how can you make yourself more visible in a world that's just so like washed out with content these days? And,
I
even
know
on
it's
LinkedIn, you have so many different profiles. What would you recommend to somebody?
Well, first of all, your profile, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, is going to be seen because Google, and we all Google people that we meet, Google indexes LinkedIn, I think 40% higher than anything else. So if I Google you, your LinkedIn profile will come up in the top 5 results, whether it's good or bad. So make sure you have a good, strong profile that shows you in your best light. To be visible on the platform, there's a couple of things. One is be consistent. So if you're going to use the platform, use it consistently. Post 3 times a week or post twice a week, but post be consistent. It's just like doing our podcasts. I don't miss a week. I make sure that there's a podcast out every week, right? Same with newsletters. It's the same thing. But the other piece is be a pattern interrupter. So, you know, be a little bit, maybe not controversial, not like in a political way. I don't mean that, but, draw people's attention with something different and unusual once in a while, and just sort of bring them to their senses and say, oh gosh, what was that? Let me see more. And, so it might be to showcase you to a new audience that you haven't seen before. So, and this is, I'm going to admit, something that hasn't been easy for me, because I've been around long before the digital world. And so many times we hear people say to be vulnerable on social media and, tell your life story on there. And that's harder for people that are older like me. And I think when we get to do it, when we do it a little bit, it works. And then we think, oh, because what's still so interesting in all the educating and business stuff we put out there, if we put a personal post out there, even on LinkedIn, it gets much more traffic than anything else, because people want to know the real you. They want to hear something about you. So
yeah, and that goes exactly back to what we were saying before about having those stories in your books, whatever it is. They want to know who you are. That's how they relate to you. You're not a robot these days.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you said, it's a good balance that you have to make between, consistently posting, that consistency, but also the difference. You have to make yourself stand out while also being consistent. So a little bit tricky to do that, I can see, but with the proper planning and guidance, then it's doable.
Exactly.
Yeah, so all that being said, I'm wondering, Janice, do you have any other last bits of advice you can offer to anybody, looking to either promote themselves as an author or just in general, and any pieces of homework to give them, a step they can take to, broaden their reach, perhaps?
Well, I would say to go and take a good look at who your audience is and where are they hanging out. And for me, if it's LinkedIn, I would say, you can reach out to me or somebody else that is a LinkedIn specialist and have them do an audit of your profile and see if it's speaking to that audience that you want it to speak to, because quite often it doesn't. And you want to make sure that if you're in business and you are looking to gain more clients, that needs to speak to your audience and draw them in to say, hey, she's talking my language. That's exactly the problem I'm having. And that's why I'm going to look into her further and see if there's a good fit, because you want to work with someone who's a good fit for you.
Yeah, so to everyone listening right now, maybe, once this podcast ends, go ahead and open up your own profile and see okay, what are my viewers seeing? Is it the audience I'm reaching out to? And really think about that, just like Janice explained, figure out who your message is for. Are you representing that accurately? Some great things to think about there. So now, Janice, if somebody is interested in working with you and learning from you and, seeing more about what the LinkedIn world has to offer, how can they get in touch with you? I'm assuming through LinkedIn.
Yeah, of course. And I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. It's just /Janice Porter. So please let me know if you do reach out that you heard me on Authors on Mission podcast with Danielle, and that way we'll make a connection right away. And I can also be found on my website, janiceporter.com, or on my podcast at Relationships Rule. And it's on all the platforms as well. And always happy to talk to people and have an intro call. There's a couple of lead magnets on my website that you're welcome to download as well if you want to join my world at all.
Awesome. Great. So we'll have all the links to that in the description of this podcast. So if you're interested, my listeners, please take a look. This is some important stuff, whatever stage of the writing world you might be in, it's always important to keep a good presence because you never know who's going to find that profile, what connections you can make. That's what Janice is all about, is building those connections. So it's just so important to be on top of that. So, yeah, thank you so much again for sharing this with us. It's been very insightful and very informative, and I think we're going to learn a lot from today's episode. So, without further ado, everybody, that brings us to the end of another insightful episode of the Authors on Mission podcast. Again, Janice, thank you for sharing your LinkedIn expertise and your wisdom with our audience today. Truly, your approaches to relationships, it's been a pleasure. We learn so much every day from new people, especially in the world of relationships. And, you don't think about it, but the writing world has a lot to do with that too. You might be behind the pages of a book, but you're connecting with people every day. So these are things we can all learn from. And to our listeners, remember that building visibility, nurturing these relationships, it's more than good networking. It's essential for authors. And as Janice pointed out, finding the right connections, it's a foundation for success. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a look at our other episodes as well. Take a look at the Relationships Rule podcast and all of Janice's links. And until next time, keep building those meaningful connections. And remember, your mission matters. Have a great day, everybody. This is Danielle Hutchinson reminding you that somewhere, someone needs the book that only you can write. Visit authorsonmission.com to start your legacy. Until next time, keep leading, keep inspiring, and keep thinking in chapters. Have a great day.